Somebody mentioned Brazil. I know Brazil has a lot of horses. Yes, this is an aspect of African life that is not well known. Um, from Senegambia, the extreme, extreme west of West Africa to the center of Africa, the Sahel belt. Well, there used to be a lot of horses, especially when you reach in northern Nigeria, Niger, and Chad. Formerly, when I was growing up in the 50s, they used to be quite common. But I've always been interested in horses and I represent them. The last time I was in the northern Ghana, I only saw donkeys, but some few chiefs still possess horses. And during Durbar, the horses are brought forward and there's display of horse riding and they make the horse dance. So the three paintings, the three horsemen. The three horsemen are representation of three sub-chiefs of a particular ethnic group. There's no rationale why I use the, but you see, when the brightest color, which is red, is in the center, when one views, I mean, this is the logic, and it's really an afterthought, is that your eye, when a person looks at the picture, your eyes will go initially to the center before the eyes begin to explore outer.
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
That is why the red is centralized. And the other bright, it's actually a very bright painting, but if you look at it, the eye is drawn to the center before it begins to explore the other ends. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the only rationale I have. But sometimes it's merely to express a concept or an idea of horsemen that I think have not been interpreted much in contemporary African art.
Yeah. The other question, the one on the right is wearing sunglasses.
Yes, yes. The advent of sunglasses, many of the people of the Sahel is a very sunny area. Remember, it's south of the Sahara. And for centuries, there were no, I understand Eskimos also have a traditional sunglasses. But the people of the Sahel, when sunglasses were introduced, really embraced it, loved it, because it cut down the glare of the glasses. But they have a peculiar way of picking the designs. They prefer the most garish and the most biggest and the most ornate sunglasses you can ever think of. Any questions?
I was interested to know. Did you have models for this picture? I mean, is this how it actually looked in the scene, or have you sort of used your imagination to make it bigger and grander than it was in real life?
No, remember, I have almost a photographic memory. Whatever my eye sees, I can depict. I've trained myself. So you remember, I started working, drawing when I was about 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever my eye grasp, it gets this thing. But then these horses are Barbary horses, which are very slim and tall. And just the indication of the horses dictate to me how they can be represented. Remember, even though it's realistic, it's not photographic realism. And it represents a life that is not known by many outsiders, that Africans have indigenous horses.
Wow.
Any questions?
Where do you want us to go next? Yeah.
Yes. There's another horse which might interest you.
Where is that?
It will come, all of them wearing sunglasses.
Is it this one?
Yes, it's on the left of the. Yes.
That is great.
And it's a bit on the dark side, but if you look, all of them, all the 5 riders are wearing glasses. Now, this, if you watch the hats from Senegambia, extreme West Africa on the west side to the center of Africa, the Sahel belt, they all have distinctive headdresses. The rider in the center is typically northern Ghanaian. The one on the second right is, no, second left is typically northern Nigerian. The one on the second right is like a Chinese, this thing is typical of Upper Volta, which is now Burkina Faso. And the one on the extreme right is northern Cameroons. So it's merely a depiction of the slight differences between horsemen of the Sahel.
Wow.
Now, as I've said, they wear goggles to cut down the sunglasses, but it has also become a fashion. And the wide selection of cheap goggles always attract my attention because they prefer the most outlandish glasses that you can ever think of. The bigger, the better. They are actually not blind. It's merely to cut down the intense sun. I think, I was born in the on the coastal part of West Africa, the forest region, and I also live in Ashanti. I mean, these are forested areas, and the contrast of colors in the terrain, I assume, is very, I don't want to use the word garish, but very bright. And also, when there's a green in the tree, the green is really intense. I mean, there's a big contrast of the colors that I see with the colors I'm seeing in London. And I think I didn't know I was using bright colors until I come to the temperate countries, and then it becomes almost garish. But I also prefer acrylics, which is intense coloration than oils. Oil is a bit mellow. Unfortunately, oil doesn't stand well to tropical weather. That is why I insist on sticking to acrylic. Yes, if you look at the work, it's a little bit very garish here, but the same cubistic approach. I mean, this is a typical tropical fruit, and there are times I use this as a basis for expression. And if you watch my work, there's a lot of tragedy in Africa, but I try to look at the brighter side of things. And this interpretation of the fruit is still using that cubistic concept, because when you begin to slice these very sweet and beautiful looking fruits, I mean, it's very easy to slice them in geometric shapes, and it's easier to eat them for that reason. Yet aesthetically, it's also pleasing. But when I do these trees, I try to use my imagination rather than perceiving them. And I just don't refer to anything. I know the fruits. So, and I create a lot of design, which I am told in Ghana that I think this is the most enterprising of my creative work. African art, traditionally, African art has very big heads. The figuration of traditional African have big heads and a small torso and so on. It's simply that the brain, which is in the head, is more important anatomical detail than anything. So they emphasize this. I'm not saying I do the same, but I throw perspective to the board. I just don't follow perspective at all. I am just organizing shapes, using the fruit as an excuse to create an arrangement that will be pleasing to the eye. But I'm not a pure abstract painter. I really rely on substance. I rely on the earth, what I can see. Yes. And so if you apply perspective to these works, it won't make any sense. It should be just perceived as an arrangement that either is pleasing to the eye or not. And from my perspective, I think I've arranged it in the most orderly fashion that will please at least my eye. I am at my best or at my elements when I do these fruits. I have been trying to use tropical flowers also, but it just doesn't work out so well as the fruit, and I don't know technically the reasons why. And so these are merely a selection that I brought from Africa for this show, but I have dozens of them at home. Well, this is my ethnic group is the Fante. Fante is a subgroup of the Great Ashanti. I don't want to use the word tribe, but Ashanti ethnic group that include Ashanti. Ashantis are well known. But in the olden days, the Fantes and the Ashantis were fighting all the time. The Fantes were on the coast, and the Fantes were held by the British for so many years. And I think recently there was a big exhibition of Fante flags in London. But I've always admired the flags, and this is about 30 years old. These paintings are about 30 years old, and they were inspired by those flags. Now that SAFO is a fighting company, indigenous fighting group that were used during warfare, and they were assisting allied to the British. The British in the 19th century were always using flags in fighting, and my ethnic group copied flags, but they designed it in their own fashion, and it has always inspired me because the pictorial element was so original. I didn't copy it exactly, but I was inspired by those flags, the imagery in those flags. As you can see on the top left is the British Union Jack. Now at the center is the figure of a very strong man in folklore called Asebo Amamfi, and it depicts how certain clans within that tribal group are so strong that when you even pull them and you pull their certain anatomical organs, you don't even hear them because they are so strong. And so that's one of those works. And then the next one is the next one is the crab, which is the emblem of my clan. It's called Cape Coast crab, Ugwa Akoto. And now the original is merely a simple definition of a crab, badly drawn, but I conceived my own crab, and that's how I depict it. It looked a little bit funny, but it's, I think, one of the works that I personally like, my own output that I like. Now, if you look at the edges, I always imitated the edges of this ethnic group of the flags. They always decorated the edges, and I imitated that. The Union Jack was used all the time before independence, that is 1957. After 1957, the ethnic group, that is the Asafo Company, Asafo means soldier, used the Ghana flag. And so the depiction of the Union Jack merely indicate that the concept of the design emanates before independence, 1957. Although the work itself was painted in the 1980s. And so the work should not be perceived in naturalistic terms. It should be perceived merely in symbolic terms. But this is the most comical of, among the most comical of my output in the field. There is another painting in that genre of the lawyer.
The parrots.
No, the parrot, two parrots. Of course, there is a parrot also used in another ethnic group within my my clan, and of course it's totally different. They use two parrots, but it was always drab looking, and I used my artistic license to invent good looking parrots, and also created a composition almost in like painterly terms, but I still maintained the design border, which has always fascinated me. I don't know why they always put that border there, and I somehow think it enhanced the work. And then if you look at the extreme left edge, there's the indication of how the flag is tied to the pole it is move around. I think this is aesthetically, most people say, is the most pleasing of the flag paintings, and you can see the Ghana national flag, indicating that my ethnic group had broken away from the British colonialists. Well, I have other colleagues who exhibited with me. One is called Bruce. Bruce, he's a Zimbabwean. I am Ghanaian, but he's Zimbabwean. And then a former student of mine called Anne Blankson Hemans, whom I taught, and he's the most realistic of the group. And her work was derived from a visit to Morocco. If you looked at the pictures of us, I'm on the extreme left, and Bruce, he's the most abstract of the group. He's next on the right, and then Anne Blankson Hemans, a former student of mine in the 1980s, and who is the most realistic representation of the group, is on the third, and then the last on the extreme right is Stephen. He couldn't come to London, but he's a Ugandan, and he's somewhat eclectic because you have very, very realistic representation of elephants as against abstracted figures of his own people.